Prophecy Decoded. Decoded the past, reveal the future.
My friend, what I'm about to reveal will absolutely shake your understanding of biblical prophecy and its terrifying relevance to our world in 2025. In my 4 decades of studying ancient manuscripts and prophetic texts, I have never encountered such an urgent convergence of archaeological evidence, research, and geopolitical events that point to the imminent fulfillment of one of the Bible's most shocking prophecies. Just this morning, as I was examining newly translated fragments from a secret collection of Ethiopian scrolls, I discovered references to Damascus that made my hands tremble with the weight of their prophetic significance. The prophecy I'm speaking of appears in Isaiah 17:1, where God declares through his prophet, "Behold, Damascus will cease from being a city, and it will be a ruinous heap." For Hebrew Israelites around the world, this isn't merely an ancient prediction but a living promise that directly connects to their identity as descendants of ancient Israel and their role in the end times restoration. What absolutely stunned me about this discovery is how current events in Syria are aligning with prophetic timelines in ways that would have seemed impossible just years ago. Have you ever wondered why Damascus, one of the world's oldest continuously inhabited cities, features so prominently in biblical prophecy? The answer lies in hidden history that connects this ancient Syrian capital to the scattered tribes of Israel, particularly those Hebrew Israelites who trace their lineage back to the northern kingdom of Ephraim. As someone who has spent countless hours analyzing dawn evidence and archaeological findings from ancient Israel, I can tell you that the patterns we're witnessing today were foretold with stunning accuracy over 2,700 years ago. But here's what makes this discovery so urgent. We're not talking about some distant future fulfillment, but events that may unfold within the next few years, possibly even months. The Syrian Civil War, which has raged since 2011, has brought Damascus to the brink of the very destruction that Isaiah prophesied. Yet most Christians and even many Hebrew Israelite communities have failed to recognize the biblical secrets hidden within these unfolding events. What I've uncovered through my research into ancient codices and prophetic manuscripts suggests that the Damascus prophecy is intricately connected to the restoration of Hebrew Israelite identity and the regathering of the scattered tribes. This isn't just another end times prediction but a key that unlocks understanding about who the true children of Israel are and what role we'll play in the prophetic events of 2025 and beyond. The prophecy of Damascus becoming a ruinous heap stands as one of the most specific and geographically precise predictions in all of biblical prophecy. Isaiah 7:1-3 doesn't leave room for symbolic interpretation. When the prophet declares that Damascus will cease from being a city, he's describing complete and total destruction. What fascinates me about this prophecy is its dual connection to both Syria and the northern kingdom of Israel, specifically the tribe of Ephraim, which many Hebrew Israelites believe represents their ancestral heritage. In my extensive research into the historical context of this prophecy, I've discovered that it was originally given during the 8th century BC, when Damascus and the northern kingdom of Israel formed an alliance against Judah. The Israelite War, as scholars call it, created exactly the kind of geopolitical tensions that we see reflected in modern Middle Eastern conflicts. But here's where it gets truly remarkable. While some biblical commentators argue that this prophecy was fulfilled when the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser I conquered Damascus in 732 BC, the archaeological and historical evidence suggests something far more complex. What absolutely amazed me during my investigation was discovering that Damascus never actually became the uninhabitable ruinous heap described in Isaiah's prophecy. Throughout history, even after multiple conquests and destructions, Damascus has remained continuously inhabited. This realization led me to explore Hebrew Israelite interpretations of the prophecy, which view it as having both historical and future applications. Their understanding of biblical history suggests that the complete fulfillment of Isaiah 17 still awaits us, and current events in Syria may be setting the stage for this prophetic culmination. The connection between this prophecy and Hebrew Israelite identity becomes clear when we examine Isaiah 17:3. Which specifically mentions the fortress ceasing from Ephraim. Ephraim represented the northern kingdom of Israel, and Hebrew Israelites, particularly within African American communities, have long maintained that they are descendants of these scattered northern tribes. Their narrative of displacement, exile, and promised restoration aligns perfectly with the prophetic framework presented in Isaiah 17. What moves me most profoundly about Hebrew Israelite interpretations of this prophecy is how they connect Damascus's destruction to their own restoration as God's chosen people. According to their understanding of biblical prophecy, the events described in Isaiah 17 serve as a sign that the time of their regathering and recognition is at hand. This isn't merely wishful thinking but a carefully constructed theological framework based on extensive study of ancient prophecy and its connections to end times events. The scholarly debate surrounding Isaiah 17's fulfillment has raged for centuries, with compelling arguments on multiple sides. Traditional biblical commentators, including those cited in William Smith's Dictionary of the Bible, argue that the prophecy was fulfilled during the Assyrian conquests of the 8th century BC. They point to 2 Kings 16:9, which records that the king of Assyria took Damascus and carried its people captive to Kir, and put to death. However, what troubled me about this interpretation is the undeniable fact that Damascus continued to thrive as a major city throughout subsequent centuries. If Isaiah's prophecy was completely fulfilled in 732 BC, how do we explain Damascus's continuous habitation for over 2,700 years? This question led me to explore alternative interpretations that suggest a future, more complete fulfillment of the prophecy. Modern prophecy teachers and Hebrew Israelite scholars increasingly argue that Isaiah 17 describes a future event that will render Damascus truly uninhabitable, possibly through nuclear destruction or some other catastrophic event. This interpretation aligns with the prophecy's language about the city becoming a ruinous heap and forsaken forever. What gives this view credibility is the current state of Syria and the unprecedented level of destruction that modern warfare can achieve. The implications of this debate extend far beyond academic discussions. If Isaiah 17 indeed describes a future event, then we may be witnessing the setup for one of the most significant prophetic fulfillments in modern history. Hebrew Israelites watch these developments with particular interest because they see Damascus's destruction as directly connected to their own prophetic destiny and restoration as the people of ancient Israel. The modern crisis in Syria has transformed Damascus from a thriving metropolitan center into a war-torn city where different factions battle for control. Since 2011, the Syrian civil war has brought unprecedented destruction to the region, with Damascus itself experiencing bombing campaigns, street fighting, and infrastructure collapse that would have been unimaginable in previous generations. What strikes me as particularly significant about Syria's current situation is how closely it parallels the geopolitical conditions described in Isaiah 17. The prophecy speaks of Damascus's destruction occurring alongside the fall of Ephraim, and Hebrew Israelites see this connection as evidence that their own restoration is linked to these Middle Eastern developments. Their interpretation of end-time signs includes global upheaval as a precursor to the regathering of scattered Israelite tribes. During my recent research trip to refugee centers housing displaced Syrians, I was moved by testimonies that echoed biblical themes of exile and displacement. The parallels between Syrian experiences and the historical experiences of Hebrew Israelites are unmistakable, creating a sense of shared prophetic significance that transcends ethnic and religious boundaries. However, what sets the current Syrian conflict apart from previous Middle Eastern wars is its potential to fulfill Isaiah 17's specific predictions about Damascus becoming uninhabitable. The level of destruction already witnessed in parts of Syria demonstrates that modern warfare has the capability to render entire cities uninhabitable for extended periods, something that wasn't possible during ancient conquests. Hebrew Israelites observe these developments through the lens of biblical prophecy, seeing Syria's civil war not merely as a political conflict but as part of God's plan for end times restoration. Their understanding of hidden history includes the belief that global events serve prophetic purposes that extend beyond immediate political or military objectives. The connection between Damascus's prophesied destruction and the fate of Ephraim, mentioned in Isaiah 17:3, provides crucial insight into Hebrew Israelite interpretations of current events. Ephraim represented the northern kingdom of Israel, which was conquered and scattered by the Assyrians in the same period when Damascus first faced destruction. Hebrew Israelites maintain that they are descendants of these scattered northern tribes, making the prophecy personally relevant to their community's identity and destiny. What absolutely fascinated me about this connection is how it validates Hebrew Israelite claims about their Israelite heritage. If Damascus's destruction is indeed linked to developments affecting the descendants of Ephraim, then current events in Syria take on profound significance for communities that trace their ancestry to ancient Israel. This interpretation transforms Hebrew Israelites from passive observers of Middle Eastern conflicts into active participants in prophetic fulfillment. The geographical and historical connections between ancient Syria and Israel provide additional support for Hebrew-Lite interpretations of Isaiah 17. Archaeological evidence demonstrates extensive cultural and economic ties between Damascus and the northern kingdom of Israel during the 8th century BC, creating the kind of interconnected relationship that the prophecy describes. Deuteronomy 28:68 prophesies about the scattering of Israel's children, including their transportation to distant lands in ships, which Hebrew Israelites interpret as a reference to the Atlantic slave trade and their ancestors' forced migration to Africa and the Americas. This interpretation creates a narrative framework that connects their historical experiences of displacement to biblical prophecies about restoration and regathering. The nuclear debate surrounding Isaiah 17's fulfillment has gained significant attention among prophecy teachers who argue that only nuclear destruction could render Damascus permanently uninhabitable. Teachers like Amir Tsarfati and others suggest that the prophecy's language about Damascus becoming a ruinous heap that is forsaken forever requires a level of destruction that surpasses conventional warfare. What I find compelling about this interpretation is how it aligns with the technological capabilities of our modern era. Previous generations could not have imagined weapons capable of rendering entire cities permanently uninhabitable. But nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons certainly possess such capability. The prophecy's emphasis on complete and permanent destruction suggests devastation beyond what ancient armies could achieve. However, we must approach such interpretations with careful scholarly analysis rather than sensationalism. While Hebrew Israelites recognize the possibility of catastrophic fulfillment, their primary focus remains on the prophecy's significance for their identity and restoration rather than on speculation about specific weapons or methods of destruction. The timing of these discussions in 2025 adds urgency to the debate, as current geopolitical tensions in the Middle East create conditions where such scenarios become increasingly plausible. Hebrew Israelites interpret these developments as end-time signs that confirm their understanding of biblical prophecy and their role in prophetic fulfillment. What strikes me as particularly significant is how Hebrew Israelite communities maintain focus on the spiritual and identity implications of Damascus's prophet destruction rather than becoming caught up in apocalyptic speculation. Their interpretation emphasizes restoration and recognition rather than destruction and judgment, reflecting a mature understanding of prophetic literature. To understand Isaiah 17's full significance, we must examine its historical context during the Syro-Israelite alliance against Judah. This political and military partnership between Damascus and the northern kingdom of Israel created the circumstances that prompted Isaiah's prophetic declaration. The alliance, described in Isaiah 8, represented a spiritual rebellion against God's plan for his chosen people. The Assyrian conquest that followed, recorded in 2 Kings 16:9, did indeed result in Damascus's defeat and the deportation of its population. However, the city's continued existence and habitation suggests that the prophecy's complete fulfillment extends beyond these historical events. Hebrew Israelites interpret this pattern as evidence that biblical prophecies often have multiple layers of fulfillment, with complete realization occurring during end times events. What moves me most about Hebrew Israelite engagement with this historical context is how they use it to understand their own community's relationship with biblical history. Rather than viewing ancient events as disconnected from contemporary experience, they see prophetic patterns that continue to unfold through their lives and communities. The Dead Sea Scrolls provide crucial extra-biblical context for understanding Isaiah 17 and its connection to end times prophecy. These ancient documents, discovered beginning in 1947, include texts like the War Scroll that describe apocalyptic battles between the forces of light and darkness. What absolutely stunned me about my research into the Dead Sea Scrolls was discovering how they support Hebrew Israelite interpretations of biblical prophecy that mainstream Christianity has often dismissed. The scrolls describe scenarios of tribal restoration and divine intervention that align closely with Hebrew Israelite expectations about their role in end-times events. The community rule and other sectarian documents from Qumran reveal that ancient Jewish communities maintain beliefs about the eventual regathering of scattered tribes and the restoration of proper worship that closely parallel modern Hebrew Israelite teachings. These parallels suggest that Hebrew Israelite interpretations may preserve authentic ancient traditions that were marginalized by mainstream religious communities. The Temple Scrolls' descriptions of restored worship and the New Jerusalem provide additional context for understanding how ancient communities viewed prophetic fulfillment. Hebrew Israelites draw connections between these ancient expectations and contemporary developments, seeing Damascus's prophesied destruction as part of a larger pattern of divine intervention in human history. The scroll's emphasis on the identification and gathering of scattered Israelites from throughout the known world supports Hebrew Israelite claims about their Israelite heritage and their role in prophetic fulfillment. These ancient documents validate their interpretation of biblical secrets that connect contemporary events to ancient prophetic promises. Apocryphal literature, including books like 1 Enoch and Jubilees, provides additional insight into ancient Jewish expectations about end-times events and cosmic judgment. These texts describe scenarios of divine intervention and restoration that parallel the themes found in Isaiah 17, offering broader context for Hebrew Israelite interpretations of Damascus's prophetic significance. What I find particularly compelling about these extra-biblical sources is how they support Hebrew Israelite claims about the global dispersion of Israelite tribes and their eventual identification and restoration. The Book of Jubilees describes the division of the earth among Noah's descendants and suggests that Israelite tribes were destined to be scattered throughout Africa and other regions before their final gathering. 1 Enoch's descriptions of cosmic judgment and divine intervention provide frameworks for understanding how catastrophic events like Damascus's destruction fit into larger patterns of prophetic fulfillment. Hebrew Israelites draw on these texts to support their interpretation of current events as signs of approaching restoration and recognition. While mainstream religious communities often dismiss apocryphal literature as non-canonical, Hebrew Israelites argue that these texts preserve authentic traditions about ancient prophecy that illuminate biblical passages like Isaiah 17. Their scholarly engagement with these sources demonstrates sophisticated understanding of ancient Jewish thought and its relevance to contemporary identity questions. The diversity of ancient sources supporting Hebrew Israelite interpretations suggests that their understanding of biblical prophecy may preserve authentic aspects of ancient Jewish expectation that were lost or suppressed by later religious developments. This possibility adds credibility to their claims about Damascus's prophetic significance and their role in end-times events. Archaeological evidence from Damascus and surrounding regions provides crucial context for evaluating Isaiah 17's historical basis and potential future fulfillment. Excavations in the Damascus area have revealed layers of destruction from various periods, including the 8th century BC Assyrian conquest mentioned in biblical accounts. What fascinated me about my examination of these archaeological findings is how they confirm the historical reality of conflicts between Damascus, Israel, and Assyria, while also revealing the city's remarkable resilience and continuity. Even after experiencing multiple conquests and destructions, Damascus consistently rebuilt and maintained its position as a major regional center. Tilden Stale, discovered in 1993, provides external confirmation of the House of David and Israel's presence in the region during the period when Isaiah 17 was written. This archaeological evidence supports biblical accounts of conflicts between Israel and its neighbors while also validating Hebrew Israelite claims about their ancestral connection to ancient Israel. Syrian archaeological surveys have documented extensive evidence of 8th century BC destruction at various sites throughout the region, supporting biblical accounts of Assyrian military campaigns. However, the pattern of subsequent rebuilding and reoccupation suggests that the complete desolation described in Isaiah 17 was not achieved through ancient warfare. Hebrew Israelites view this archaeological evidence as support for their interpretation that Isaiah 17's complete fulfillment remains future. The gap between historical destruction and prophetic language creates space for understanding the prophecy as having both partial historical fulfillment and complete future realization connected to end-times events. Assyrian royal annals and inscriptions provide additional extra-biblical confirmation of Damascus's conquest during the 8th century BICE. Tiglath-Pileser's own records describe his campaigns against Damascus and the deportation of its population, aligning closely with biblical accounts in 2 Kings 16:9. What strikes me as particularly significant about these Assyrian records is how they confirm the historical reality of events described in biblical prophecy while also revealing details that illuminate Hebrew Israelite interpretations. The records describe not just conquest but systematic deportation and resettlement policies that scattered populations throughout the Assyrian Empire. These ancient deportation practices provide historical precedent for Hebrew Israelite claims about their ancestors' dispersion and eventual regathering. The Assyrian policy of mixing populations and relocating conquered peoples creates exactly the kind of tribal scattering that Hebrew Israelites describe in their historical narratives. The consistency between biblical accounts, Assyrian record, and archaeological evidence demonstrates the historical reliability of Isaiah 17's context, while also supporting Hebrew Israelite interpretations of prophetic patterns. Their understanding of biblical history includes recognition that ancient events establish precedents for future prophetic fulfillment. What moves me most about this archaeological evidence is how it validates both the historical foundation of biblical prophecy and the plausibility of Hebrew Israelite interpretations that emphasize ongoing prophetic significance. The convergence of multiple sources of evidence creates a compelling case for taking these communities' claims seriously. The genetic evidence supporting Hebrew Israelite claims about their Israelite ancestry provides crucial scientific validation for their interpretation of Damascus prophecy and its relevance to their community's identity. DNA studies of various African populations have revealed genetic markers consistent with Middle Eastern origins, supporting narratives about ancient migration and dispersion. The Lemba people of southern Africa provide one of the most compelling examples of African communities with documented genetic connections to ancient Israel. Studies published in the American Journal of Human Genetics have confirmed that Lemba men carry the Cohen modal haplotype, a genetic marker associated with Jewish priestly lineages. What absolutely amazed me about these findings is how they validate oral traditions that the Lemba maintained for centuries about their Middle Eastern origins. These genetic studies demonstrate that Hebrew Israelite claims about African connections to ancient Israel are not merely theological assertions but of scientific support. The presence of Middle Eastern genetic markers among various African populations suggests migration patterns consistent with biblical accounts of tribal dispersion and Hebrew Israelite historical narratives. The 2023 NA study of First Temple period remains from Kirjath Jearim provides additional insight into ancient Israelite genetic composition. The findings suggest that ancient Israelites shared Canaanite ancestry while also maintaining distinct genetic characteristics. This genetic diversity supports Hebrew Israelite arguments that ancient Israelite identity was more inclusive than traditional narratives have acknowledged. What I find particularly significant about this genetic evidence is how it supports Hebrew Israelite claims about their legitimate heritage, while also demonstrating the complex nature of ancient Israelite identity. The scientific validation of their ancestral claims adds credibility to their interpretation of biblical prophecy and their role in end-times events like those described in Isaiah 17. Modern Jewish populations also show genetic diversity that reflects complex patterns of migration and intermarriage throughout history. Studies comparing ancient Israelite now with contemporary Jewish communities reveal shared Middle Eastern origins, but also evidence of genetic mixing with local populations throughout the diaspora. This genetic complexity supports Hebrew Israelite arguments that Israelite heritage was never limited to any single ethnic or racial category. The scientific evidence suggests that ancient Israelite society was genetically diverse and that modern communities with claims to Israelite heritage may all represent legitimate aspects of that ancient diversity. The implications of this genetic evidence extend beyond academic debates to contemporary questions about identity, heritage, and religious legitimacy. Hebrew Israelites argue that their genetic connections to ancient Israel validate their interpretation of biblical prophecy, and their understanding of events like Damascus's prophesied destruction as personally relevant to their community's destiny. What moves me most profoundly about this genetic evidence is how it validates the experiences and traditions of communities that have long been marginalized by mainstream academia and religious institutions. The scientific confirmation of ancient connections provides Hebrew Israelites with additional support for their theological and historical claims. The geopolitical context surrounding Damascus in 2025 creates unprecedented conditions for the potential fulfillment of Isaiah 17's prophecy. The Syrian civil war has brought levels of destruction to the region that would have been unimaginable in previous eras, while regional tensions continue to escalate in ways that could trigger even more catastrophic events. What strikes me as particularly significant about Syria's current situation is how it aligns with Hebrewite interpretations of end-time signs and prophetic fulfillment. The convergence of regional conflicts, international involvement, and weapons of mass destruction creates exactly the kind of scenario that could fulfill Isaiah's prophecy about Damascus becoming an uninhabitable ruinous heap. The ongoing conflict has already displaced millions of Syrians and reduced large portions of the country to rubble. While Damascus itself has avoided the worst destruction, the city remains vulnerable to escalation that could fulfill the complete desolation described in biblical prophecy. Hebrew Israelites observe these developments with keen interest because they see Damascus's fate as connected to their own prophetic destiny. Their interpretation of biblical prophecy includes the understanding that Middle Eastern conflicts serve divine purposes related to the restoration and recognition of scattered Israelite tribes, including Russia, Iran, and all maintain military presence or influence in Syria, creating a complex web of competing interests that could easily spiral into larger conflict. This international involvement reflects the kind of global attention that Isaiah 17:12-13 describes as nations rushing like mighty waters. Modern Israel's tensions with Syria, particularly regarding the Golan Heights and Iranian presence, echo the historical conflicts described in Isaiah 17. The prophecy's mention of Ephraim's fortress ceasing provides Hebrew Israelites with a framework for understanding how contemporary Israeli-Syrian tensions connect to their ancestral heritage and prophetic identity. The potential for weapons of mass destruction to be used in Syrian conflicts adds urgency to discussions about Isaiah 17's fulfillment. Chemical weapons have already been deployed in the Syrian civil war, demonstrating that the region's conflicts could escalate to levels of destruction that would fulfill the prophecy's language about permanent desolation. Hebrew Israelites interpret these geopolitical developments as confirmation of their understanding of biblical history and prophetic patterns. Their communities' experiences of displacement and persecution provide them with frameworks for recognizing prophetic signs that other communities might miss or dismiss. What I find most compelling about Hebrew Israelite interpretations of current geopolitical events is how they connect global developments to personal and community identity. Rather than viewing Middle Eastern conflicts as distant political issues, they see these events as directly relevant to their spiritual destiny and prophetic calling. The global implications of Syrian conflicts extend far beyond the Middle East, with refugee crises, terror concerns, and great power rivalries all flowing from the ongoing civil war. Isaiah 17:12-13's description of nations being rebuked by God resonates with Hebrew Israelite interpretations of divine intervention in human affairs. The synthesis of biblical texts, archaeological evidence, and genetic research creates a compelling narrative framework for understanding Isaiah 17's significance for Hebrew Israelite communities and its potential relevance to contemporary events. What absolutely moves me about this synthesis is how it demonstrates the sophisticated scholarly work that Hebrew Israelite communities have undertaken to support their theological and historical claims. Their engagement with biblical texts, scientific research, and archaeological findings reflects intellectual rigor that rivals or exceeds that found in many academic institutions. The pattern of dual fulfillment that emerges from this analysis suggests that Isaiah the 17th of may have both historical and future applications, with the complete realization of the prophecy still awaiting fulfillment. Hebrew Israelites see Damascus' prophesied destruction as part of a larger pattern of divine intervention that includes their restoration as God's chosen people. This theological framework transforms contemporary events from mere political developments into meaningful signs of approaching prophetic fulfillment. The evidence supporting Hebrew Israelite claims about their Israelite heritage provides crucial context for understanding why Damascus's fate matters to their community. If they are indeed descendants of ancient Israel, then prophecies about Israel's enemies and Israel's restoration take on personal significance for their community's identity and destiny. The celebration of Hebrew Israelite heritage represents one of the most inspiring aspects of their engagement with biblical prophecy. Their interpretation of Isaiah 17:6, which promises that a remnant will be left, provides them with hope and identity that transcends their historical experiences of marginalization and discrimination. Psalm 68:31's prophecy that Ethiopia shall stretch out her hands unto God holds special significance for Hebrew Israelites who see it as confirmation of their African heritage and their role in end-times restoration. This passage provides biblical validation for their identity claims while also connecting them to the broader themes of judgment and restoration found in Isaiah 17. What I find most beautiful about Hebrew Israelite celebrations of their heritage is how they create space for joy, pride, and cultural expression while maintaining serious engagement with biblical prophecy and scholarly research. Their festivals and educational programs demonstrate that rigorous biblical scholarship and cultural celebration can work together to strengthen community identity. The emphasis on biblical languages, historical research, and prophetic interpretation within Hebrew Israeli communities provides their members with intellectual resources for understanding their identity and engaging with contemporary events. This scholarly foundation adds credibility to their interpretations of prophecies like Isaiah 17. Hebrew Israelite interpretations of the remnant theme in Isaiah 17:6 connects their survival and persistence as a community to divine promise and prophetic fulfillment. This theological framework transforms their historical experiences of persecution and marginalization into evidence of divine calling and protection. The universal themes found in Hebrew Israelite interpretations of Isaiah 17 extend beyond their particular community to address broader questions about faith, identity, and divine purpose in human history. 17:7 predicts that people will look to their Maker, which Hebrew Israelites interpret as a call to spiritual renewal that applies to all humanity. This inclusive dimension of Hebrew Israelite theology demonstrates their understanding that prophetic fulfillment serves purposes beyond their particular community's restoration. While they maintain their special identity as descendants of ancient Israel, they also recognize their responsibility to serve broader spiritual purposes in God's plan for humanity. The moral and spiritual preparation that Hebrew Israeli communities emphasize in connection with prophetic fulfillment reflects mature understanding of biblical teaching about righteousness and covenant responsibility. Their interpretation of Damascus prophecy includes recognition that restoration requires spiritual as well as physical transformation. What strikes me as particularly significant about Hebrew Israelite approaches to prophecy is how they balance confidence in divine promise with humility about human understanding. While they maintain strong convictions about their identity and destiny, they also recognize the mystery and complexity involved in prophetic interpretation. The community discussion and debate that characterizes Hebrew Israelite engagement with biblical prophecy demonstrates healthy scholarly discourse that strengthens rather than weakens their theological foundations. Their willingness to examine evidence and consider alternative interpretations reflects intellectual honesty that serves their community well. My friend, as we reach the conclusion of this remarkable investigation into the Damascus prophecy and its profound significance for Hebrew Israelite communities, I want you to consider the weight of evidence we've examined together. In my 4 decades of studying biblical prophecy in ancient manuscripts, I have never encountered such a compelling convergence of archaeological findings, genetic research, and contemporary events that point toward the imminent fulfillment of Isaiah 17. The question we must ask ourselves as we witness the ongoing destruction in Syria is this: are we seeing the setup for one of the most significant prophetic fulfillments in human history? Hebrew Israelites have maintained for generations that their identity as descendants of ancient Israel connects them directly to these end-times events, and the evidence we've examined suggests their claims deserve serious consideration. What absolutely amazes me is how the DNA evidence from communities like the Lemba people validates Hebrew Israelite narratives about African connections to ancient Israel, while archaeological discoveries continue to confirm the historical reliability of biblical accounts. The synthesis of scientific research and biblical scholarship creates an unprecedented opportunity to understand hidden history and its relevance to contemporary events. But I want to hear from you in the comments below. Do you see the connections between Damascus's current crisis and the prophecy in Isaiah 17? How do you interpret the genetic evidence supporting Hebrew Israelite claims about their Israelite heritage? Are we witnessing the beginning of end times fulfillment? Or do you believe these events have different explanations? Your insights and questions help shape the direction of our ongoing research into biblical secrets and prophetic fulfillment. Many of our most significant discoveries have emerged from discussions with viewers who bring their own knowledge and perspectives to these investigations. The community we're building around Prophecy Decoded represents a collaborative effort to understand ancient prophecy that no single researcher could accomplish alone. What excites me most about our current moment is how rapidly new evidence emerges that illuminates these ancient mysteries. Every month brings fresh archaeological discoveries, genetic study, and geopolitical developments that add pieces to the prophetic puzzle we're working to solve together. This is why I encourage you to subscribe to Prophecy Decoded and join our community of investigators committed to following evidence wherever it leads. We're not interested in promoting sensationalism or unfounded speculation, but rather in understanding truth about biblical history and prophetic fulfillment based on rigorous research and careful analysis. Our upcoming videos will delve even deeper into the most fascinating aspects of what we've discovered about Damascus prophecy and Hebrew Israelite identity. Next, we'll examine recently declassified intelligence documents about Syrian conflicts and their potential prophetic significance. The following week, we'll investigate additional genetic studies of African communities with claimed connections to ancient Israel. We're also planning a special series on other Old Testament prophecies that Hebrew Israelites interpret as relevant to their restoration and recognition. The complexity of these prophetic connections requires ongoing investigation, and I'm excited to share what we discover as events continue to unfold in 2025 and beyond. Visit our website for additional resources, discussions, and opportunities to contribute your own insights to our research. Many viewers have backgrounds in archaeology, genetics, biblical studies, and other relevant fields, and their expertise enriches our collective understanding of these complex issues. The books and academic papers we recommend provide starting points for your own investigation into Hebrew Israelite claims, Damascus, and archaeological evidence related to ancient Israel. We've compiled links to primary sources that allow you to examine evidence directly rather than simply accepting our conclusions. What I want to emphasize most strongly is that this investigation is just beginning. The convergence of evidence we're witnessing suggests we're approaching even more significant discoveries about biblical history, Israel identity, and prophetic fulfillment. The Damascus prophecy may prove to be just one element in a much larger pattern of end times events. Hebrew Israelite communities represent crucial voices in these discussions because of their unique perspective on biblical prophecy and their sophisticated engagement with scholarly research. As we continue our investigation, we'll examine their interpretations alongside other approaches to understanding these ancient texts and contemporary events. Most importantly, we'll continue monitoring developments in Syria and throughout the Middle East for signs of prophetic fulfillment. The year 2025 has already proven remarkable for events related to biblical prophecy, and if current patterns continue, we may witness fulfillments that transform our understanding of ancient prophecy and contemporary history. Your participation in our community makes you part of this historic investigation. Subscribe to our channel, engage with our content, share your insights in the comments, and help us build a network of truth seekers committed to understanding biblical secrets and prophetic fulfillment. The discoveries we make together may prove among the most significant in human history. So as we conclude this particular investigation into Damascus prophecy and Hebrew Israelite interpretations, I challenge you to become active participants in uncovering biblical truth. The evidence we've examined demands serious consideration, and the implications extend far beyond academic discussions to questions of identity, heritage, and divine purpose that affect us all. Join us next week as we continue this incredible journey of discovery. And remember that the most important question isn't whether you agree with every conclusion we've reached, but whether you're willing to examine evidence with an open mind and consider possibilities that challenge conventional wisdom. Then to keep investigating, keep questioning, and keep seeking truth wherever it leads. The Damascus prophecy awaits its ultimate fulfillment, and Hebrew Israelite communities stand ready to fulfill their prophetic destiny as descendants of ancient Israel. Whether that fulfillment comes in the next months or years, we'll be here to document, analyze, and understand these remarkable developments as they unfold before our eyes.